Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to my channel. Picture this, it's 11:07 p.m. Your phone is face down on the nightstand, and you're replaying the last message you sent her. 3 gray dots pulsed, then vanished. You told yourself you'd wait for her reply, but the silence is starting to feel heavier than sleep. Somewhere inside, a small voice whispers, "What if I'd said it differently?" That whisper is why you're here tonight. Because every man who has ever held his breath after pressing send knows there are strings of words that bend the room, that make a woman lower her guard without ever realizing it, that slip past the rational mind and land in the place where longing begins. I've spent the last 2 decades sitting across from couples in every stage of unraveling, new lovers anxious to impress, 15-year marriages gasping for oxygen, and I've watched those same 3 text secrets work like invisible hands tilting the balance of desire. They aren't pick-up lines. They are tiny acts of emotional choreography. Tonight I'm handing you the music. Lean in close, because once you feel how these words move inside her nervous system, you'll never type, "What's up?" the same way again. You know that hush that falls over a restaurant when someone at the next table says something so intimate the entire room seems to lean in. The first forbidden text secret is that hush, delivered in 12 keystrokes. I call it the Velvet Cliffhanger. It's a sentence that ends 1 word short of confession. A breath held just long enough for her imagination to sprint ahead. Think of it as the difference between handing her a wrapped gift and sliding a ribbon across her palm. One tells her what you feel. The other invites her to feel it herself. Imagine you've spent the afternoon texting about nothing spectacular, traffic, the way her coffee order sounds like a small poem, the song she can't shake. Then, instead of the expected, "Talk later," you send, "I just caught myself smiling at something you said 3 hours ago, and now I can't decide if I should tell you what it was or keep it." You stop. You don't finish. You let the ellipsis hover like a held note. What happens next is neurological. Her brain starts producing its own ending, and because she authored it, the emotion is hers, not yours. She feels the tug before she analyzes it. The beauty is that nothing overt has been declared. You've simply created a tiny vacuum, and nature, our hunger for completion, does the rest. But, and this is crucial, the Velvet Cliffhanger only works if the rest of your conversation has been generous. It's the pause after a song you already love, not the silence that follows a stranger's mumble. So earlier in the day you seed small observations. Your voice does this low thing when you're pretending not to be excited. Or, "I noticed you hesitate before saying the word maybe," like you're tasting it first. These lines are miniature mirrors. They show her you see the fine grain of her, not just the outline. When the cliffhanger arrives, she trusts the drop because she's already felt the safety of your attention. The second secret is what I call echoing the unsaid. Women often speak in subtext, no news there, but most men either miss it or pounce on it too directly. Echoing the unsaid is the art of typing back the emotional frequency she just transmitted without naming it. Suppose she messages, "Long day, glad it's over." The easy reply is, "Yeah, me too." The magnetic reply is, "I can almost feel the weight sliding off your shoulders." You didn't ask what went wrong. You mirrored the relief she hasn't fully articulated. She reads your line and thinks, "He gets it," even if she couldn't have told you what was. The effect compounds when you add a sensory detail. "I can almost feel the weight sliding off your shoulders," the way the air changes after rain. Now she's not only understood, she's inside a shared moment with you. That is the doorway to intimacy, and it opens inward, not outward. If you're wondering how often to use these, think of seasoning, not sauce. 1 Velvet Cliffhanger every 72 hours keeps its mystique. Echoing the unsaid works best when it appears effortless, like catching a ball she didn't realize she'd thrown. Overuse either feels theatrical or needy, and nothing evaporates desire faster than the sense that a man is performing rather than responding. Now, before we step further, let me tell you about Marcus, a client who swore texting was not his love language. Marcus is 43, a civil engineer who builds bridges, but couldn't seem to build a bridge to his girlfriend's imagination. Their exchanges were efficient. Flight landed, dinner at 7. One night she sent him a photo of her feet in hotel sheets with the caption, "My view tonight." He started to reply, "Nice." Instead, on a whim, he texted back, "I keep zooming in on the curve of your ankle. There's a story there, and I'm trying to read it upside down." She answered with a single. Then, 5 minutes later, a voice note in which her laugh was so soft it sounded like silk tearing. That was the first night in months they talked until sunrise. Marcus hadn't used fancy words. He'd simply aimed his curiosity at a place she had already offered him. Curiosity, voiced without demand, is catnip. Which brings us to the third secret, the one most men never dare because it feels counterintuitive, confessing the risk. It's a line that admits the very act of texting her is dangerous to your composure. Women are so used to being pursued that when a man confesses, the chase rattles him. It registers as honesty, and honesty is erotic. The form is simple, you state what you're tempted to do. Then you hand her the veto. Example, "I want to send you something reckless, but I'll only press send if you whisper go." The subtext is, "I desire you, and I respect your gait." That combination, hunger plus restraint, creates the same adrenaline as leaning over a balcony safe enough, yet breathless. Let's weave these together so you can feel the choreography. Morning, you echo the unsaid after she mentions a tense meeting. Afternoon, you drop a Velvet Cliffhanger about a memory you almost shared. Evening, you confess the risk before sending a voice note that simply says her name, slowly twice. By the end of the day, she's lived inside your attention 3 distinct ways: seen, wondered, and asked for consent. That is not a strategy. That is a slow waltz across the distance a screen usually enforces. And here's the quiet miracle: when you text like this, you stop counting minutes between replies. You're no longer scanning for signs she likes you back. The conversation itself becomes the reward. Desire, after all, is not a destination you reach by clever lines. It's a rhythm you fall into when the lines disappear. There is a moment, usually around the second glass of wine or the third mile of a late night drive, when she will reread the thread and notice the spaces between your words as much as the words themselves. Those spaces are the fourth forbidden secret, the intentional gap. I'm not talking about playing hard to get. That game is as brittle as chalk. I'm talking about leaving deliberate silence so the next sentence lands like a fingertip on a pulse point, sudden, unmistakable, alive. Imagine you've been exchanging photographs all afternoon: the cracked leather seat of a taxi, the neon reflection in a puddle, the way her bracelet slipped down while she reached for her coffee. The rhythm is quick, almost playful. Then at 7:18 p.m. you stop. You let the thread cool. You do not explain. You do not apologize. Maybe you go cook dinner. Maybe you simply stare out the window and let the city hum. 3 hours later you send a single line: I just discovered silence has your name in it. Nothing more. The gap does 2 things simultaneously. It proves you have a life outside the screen, and it gives her time to feel the absence of your voice. Absence, when it follows genuine presence, is not emptiness, it's space she will instinctively want to close. Soon she'll begin to anticipate the gap. That anticipation is foreplay in lowercase letters. But, and this is where men often stumble, if the gap becomes predictable, it dies. Silence must feel like weather, not like strategy. So you vary the interval. Sometimes you disappear for 20 minutes, sometimes for an evening. The compass is not the clock, it's your own embodied life. When you return, you bring back a detail that proves you were actually living. There was a busker on the corner playing our song with a broken harmonica, and I swear he grinned when I dropped a 20. Now the gap and the reentry are braided together, and she senses the shape of your day without having been there. That is when the conversation becomes a shared skin. The 5th secret is what I call the sensory loop. You feed her one physical detail: sound, scent, texture, then invite her to respond with her own. The loop sounds simple, yet it collapses the distance between bodies better than any photograph. You might text: I'm holding the mug you used this morning. It still smells like your cinnamon gum. She answers: that's impossible, I switched to mint last week. You reply: then the cinnamon must be the ghost of yesterday's you. Now the mug, the gum, the ghost are all vibrating in the same sentence. The sensory loop works because it gives her permission to inhabit her body in front of you, and it tells her you are already inhabiting yours with her in mind. Let me give you a real fragment from a couple I saw last year. Elena was flying from Lisbon to New York. David was in Chicago. Somewhere over the Atlantic, she sent him a picture of the wings slicing through a cloud bank. Instead of "wow, beautiful," David wrote, "I can almost taste the metal cold on my tongue from here." Elena laughed out loud, startling the stranger beside her. She wrote back, "and I can feel your stubble against my cheek, as if you're the window." By the time she landed, they had created an entire cabin of imaginary touch. They didn't need sexting, they needed synesthesia. The sensory loop does that. It translates distance into shared nerve endings. But there is a 6th secret, quieter, almost devotional, and it is called the future whisper. This is not, "we should go to Paris someday," grandiosity. It is a microscopic promise slipped into the present moment. You see the detail so small she could miss it if she weren't listening with her whole body. Example: next time you wear that green sweater, I want to be the one who pulls the thread when it snags. The power is in the specificity. The sweater is real, the thread is real, the snag is inevitable. You have taken a mundane future and attached your hands to it. She will walk past her closet tomorrow, see the green sweater, and feel the tug of that future thread. Now here is where the secrets start to braid. You begin the day with a sensory loop. Your laugh is still in my car from yesterday morning. It's wedged between the seat and the emergency brake. Midday you allow an intentional gap. Evening you return with a future whisper. When the sun drops behind your building tonight, look for the reflection in the 3rd window from the left. I'll be the one waving even though you can't see me. 3 movements, no announcements. By midnight she is not wondering whether you like her. She is wondering what it will feel like to sit in that car and hear her own laugh coming back at her through your smile. And you, what do you feel? You feel the relief of no longer calculating. These secrets aren't chess moves, they are tiny acts of noticing turned outward. When you text this way, you are no longer performing desire, you are practicing it. Like a musician running scales until the notes forget they are separate. The thread thickens, becomes rope, becomes the kind of connection people call chemistry, even though it's really just attention, repeated until it feels like fate. The seventh secret arrives only when the first six have been tasted, not merely recited. I call it the mirror tilt, because it requires you to reflect her back to herself at an angle she has never quite seen, yet it still feels unmistakably her. Imagine her sending a hurried voice memo from a taxi. I'm late. My hair's a mess. I spilled coffee on my sleeve. I'm a disaster. The ordinary reply is reassurance. You're not a disaster. You're beautiful. The mirror tilt is gentler, more mischievous. You write, disaster looks good on you, like you borrowed chaos's leather jacket and forgot to give it back. In one sentence you acknowledge her mess, adorn it, and return it shining. She laughs, but more importantly she feels seen without being fixed. Fixing is for broken things, witnessing is for whole ones. The mirror tilt works because it sidesteps the trap of flattery. Flattery inflates, reflection reveals. When you tilt the mirror, you invite her to occupy her own contradictions comfortably. That invitation is rare, and rarity is an aphrodisiac older than language. But the eighth secret is the one that terrifies men the most because it demands the courage to become small. I call it the vulnerable parenthesis. You slip a confession between two mundane sentences as if it were an afterthought, yet the confession is the true payload. Example, just ordered ramen, extra scallions, no egg, and I suddenly remembered how my mother used to hum when she sliced scallions, which is probably why I still can't crack an egg without feeling like I'm betraying her. Then, immediately you pivot. Anyway, how was your meeting? The pivot is vital. It tells her you are not asking to be rescued, only witnessed. That parenthesis, tiny, fragile, unguarded, creates the emotional equivalent of a low-lit room where secrets feel safe. She will answer your ordinary question, but her reply will come from the same soft lighting. Let me tell you about Sanjay, 51, recently divorced, convinced women his age wanted curated confidence, not messy truths. He tried the vulnerable parenthesis almost by accident. He texted Priya, a colleague he'd known for years but never touched, stuck in traffic behind a truck of oranges, smells like the school trip where I got car sick and they made me sit alone. Funny how shame still smells like citrus. He hit send before he could overthink. Priya replied with a voice note. When I was 9, my father made me walk home because I threw up on his new seats. I still can't smell leather without feeling 6 inches tall. 2 childhood humiliations, traded in under a minute, became the first brick in a new architecture between them. 6 months later, Sanjay told me that parenthesis had done more for their intimacy than every confident dinner date he'd orchestrated. The ninth secret, the final one, is the counter-confession. This is where you name the very desire you have been dancing around, but you name it backwards, as if you are the one who might get hurt. Example, if I keep texting you like this, I'm afraid I'll start believing you actually enjoy me, and that thought is almost too bright to look at. Notice the reversal. You are not claiming power, you are admitting peril. The counter-confession works because it reframes pursuit as surrender. In a culture that teaches men to storm the castle, you instead stand at the gate and say, I'm not sure the drawbridge will hold my weight. Paradoxically, that uncertainty feels like safety to her because it places the next move in her hands without making her responsible for your collapse. Now, watch how these last 3 secrets braid into a single evening. She texts from a gallery opening. Too many people, too much champagne. I'm hiding in the courtroom. You reply with a mirror tilt. Courtroom Eleni is my favorite version of you, pressed between wool and secrets. She sends back a laughing emoji, then a photo of a child's red mitten abandoned on a bench. You respond with a vulnerable parenthesis. I once lost a mitten on a field trip and spent the whole day pretending my hand wasn't cold so my dad wouldn't feel guilty. She answers with a voice note so soft you have to hold the phone to your ear to hear. I still have the other mitten in a box labeled, proof I was small. Finally, you let the counter-confession arrive. I'm 2 seconds away from offering to drive across town just to bring you hot chocolate, and that impulse scares me a little. She doesn't tell you to come. She tells you where the side entrance is, and that is how the conversation moves from screen to skin without a single explicit invitation. So where do we land, you and I, after these 9 secrets? We land in the knowledge that desire is not a line you deliver. It is a room you co-create, 1 sentence at a time. The forbidden part was never the words themselves. It was the willingness to mean them, to let them cost you something. If you take nothing else, take this. Every text you send is either a transaction or a transmission. A transaction asks, what do I get? A transmission offers, this is what I feel. The secrets you now carry are simply ways to turn your phone into a lantern instead of a ledger. Hold it steady, speak into the glow, and she will find her own way toward the light. And so the thread between you now carries weight, like a silk rope swaying across a quiet river. She answers the side door message not with logistics but with a single word rendered in lowercase. Okay, and you feel the hush that follows church bells. The silence is not empty. It is full of footsteps you haven't taken yet. You slip your phone into your pocket, keys already singing against one another, and you drive not like a man on his way to seduction, but like a man returning something he borrowed without realizing it was hers to begin with. When you arrive, the city has thinned itself to amber street lamps and the wet hush of tires on cobblestone. She is waiting under the awning, coat collar turned up, cheeks carrying the cold like two small lanterns. You step out, hot chocolate in hand, too sweet, too small, absurdly perfect. Neither of you speaks. Instead, she takes the cup, wraps your fingers around it to steady the lid, and the heat travels from cardboard to skin to blood without asking permission. You realize the secrets have done their work. They have delivered you to the place where words can finally retire. Inside the gallery, the courtroom smells of cedar and champagne breath. She hangs your jacket next to hers, two sleeves touching like shy teenagers. A security guard passes, nods once, and suddenly you are alone among strangers' abandoned scarves. She turns back against a rack of wool and says, "Tell me the rest of the sentence you left hanging this afternoon." You know exactly which one. You take a breath so deep you feel it in your ankles. I was going to say, you begin, that the thing making me smile was the thought of how your shoulders rise a millimeter when you pretend not to be nervous, and I wanted to be the person who tells you you're allowed to put them down. The sentence leaves your mouth and hovers between you like a glass ornament. She doesn't break it. She watches it spin. Then, very quietly, she exhales and the ornament settles intact. There is a kind of kissing that begins with distance. You stand a foot apart, eyes locked, and the distance itself becomes a slow, invisible caress. She lifts the hot chocolate to her lips, sips, then offers it to you. The rim is warm where her mouth was. You drink, tasting her lipstick faintly mint and something darker, and the intimacy is so precise it almost hurts. Somewhere in the building a clock strikes 11. You both smile at the cliché, and the smile does what every smile born of shared irony does. It creates a private country whose borders are just the two of you. Eventually the crowd thins further, coats are claimed, the bar closes. A curator begins to switch off lights section by section. You help her into her jacket, fingertips brushing the nape of her neck where a few strands have escaped. She shivers, but not from cold. Walking out, you pass a painting neither of you noticed earlier, a man rowing a small boat toward an island that might or might not be there. You pause. She slips her hand into yours the way someone might tuck a letter into a pocket. Quietly, like it was always meant to rest there. Outside, the air smells of river and exhaust. You don't ask where to go. The conversation now is happening in glances and micro movements. She tilts her head toward the footbridge. You nod. Halfway across, you stop beneath a lamp that flickers like an old film reel. Below, the water carries neon reflections the way memory carries longing, blurred, inverted, stubbornly beautiful. She leans on the railing, looks sideways at you and says, "I thought text was enough. Turns out it was only the map." You reply, "Maps are promises. Walking them is the risk." She smiles and the risk feels suddenly like privilege. You walk on. The city narrows to the sound of two sets of footsteps and the soft percussion of her coat brushing your arm. At her building, the foyer light is the color of late-night bakeries. She searches for keys, finds them, then hesitates. The hesitation is its own sentence. You lift her hand, turn it palm up, and trace the lifeline with your thumb as if reading Braille. "I don't want to end tonight," you say, "but I also don't want to rush the middle." She closes her fingers over your thumb, holding the statement like a small bird. "Then come up for tea," she answers, "and let's stretch the middle until dawn forgets its job." Inside the elevator, mirrors on three sides multiply you into infinity. You watch yourselves watch each other. Every reflection is a fraction of a second behind, creating an echo of motion that feels like deja vu rendered in real time. She presses the button for the fourth floor, then steps closer so her shoulder touches your chest. The doors close. The ascent is slow, deliberate. You can hear the cables humming the way a throat hums before speech. She lifts her face. The space between your mouths is now a single heartbeat. The elevator dings. Neither of you moves. Another heartbeat. Then she turns, keys already in the lock, and the door swings open to the scent of books and something citrus simmering on low heat. You toe off your shoes without asking. She disappears into the kitchen. You wander the living room, fingertips grazing spines of novels you've both read but never discussed. A record player sits silent, arm lifted like a question. You lower the needle. Nina Simone begins to exhale into the room. When she returns with 2 cups of something amber and gingery, steam curling like cursive, you are both already swaying to a tempo slower than your pulses. She sets the cups on the coffee table, kicks off her own shoes and steps into your orbit. There is no choreography, only the gradual surrender of inches. Your forehead rests against hers. Her eyelashes brush your cheekbone. Time thins to the width of a sigh. Outside the window, the city keeps breathing, but inside the apartment, the air rearranges itself around 2 bodies learning the shape of their own restraint. You kiss, not the hungry collision you once rehearsed in your head, but the hush that follows when curiosity finally meets permission. It is a kiss that tastes of ginger, lipstick, and the faintest echo of cedar from the courtroom. When you part, you do not speak. Words have done their job. Now they rest. She leads you to the couch, pulls a blanket over both of you, and fits herself along the length of you like an answer that has been waiting for the question to arrive. Somewhere between the second song and the third, your phone vibrates once, a notification from the world you left outside. Without looking, you switch it to airplane mode. She notices, smiles into your shoulder and whispers, "Good. The syllable is barely sound, more breath than voice, yet it travels the entire length of your spine. You close your eyes and feel the river of the night moving under the bridge of your ribs, carrying 9 small secrets that have finally delivered you here to the hush after the hush, to the moment when conversation becomes climate and the room itself decides to stay. Dawn arrives sideways, the kind of pale gold that sneaks under curtains and paints the floorboards like a quiet apology for last night's rain. You wake first, not because the light is loud, but because the room is humming with a silence you haven't heard in years, the hush that follows truth. She is curled into the crook of your arm, her breath slow, steady, tasting faintly of the tea that eventually cooled untouched on the table. You watch the small flutter of her eyelids as she dreams, and you realize the 9 secrets didn't end at her door. They simply changed form. Words became glances, glances became breath, breath became the small, unhurried choreography of bodies learning they do not need to rush. You slip from beneath the blanket, careful not to wake her, and find your phone still on airplane mode. The screen shows no missed calls, no red dots demanding attention. Only the last text you sent last night, counter confession, unadorned, still glowing faintly in the memory of the screen. You delete nothing. Instead, you open a new message and type the first line of what you now understand is an ongoing conversation, one that no longer needs tricks because the foundation has been poured and the walls are breathing. You write, "The sun is asking me to describe the color of your shoulder in this light. I'm tempted to let it speak for itself." You save it as draft. You will send it later when she's awake and the day has settled into ordinary hours, because urgency has been replaced by continuity. She stirs, murmurs your name without opening her eyes, then pats the empty space you left. You return, fitting yourself behind her, nose against the warm hollow where neck becomes spine. She sighs, a sound like pages turning, and says, "I was dreaming we were texting each other from opposite sides of the same bed." You laugh quietly. The dream is absurd and perfect. "What did I say?" you ask. She smiles into the pillow. You sent, "I'm right here," and then you added an ellipsis, and I spent the rest of the dream wondering what the rest of the sentence was. You kiss the top of her shoulder and answer aloud, "No ellipsis needed. I'm right here, and I'm not going anywhere." The words feel brand new, as if they were invented for this exact patch of morning light. Later, over coffee that tastes better for being made in her chipped blue mugs, you scroll back through the thread, the Velvet Cliffhanger, the sensory loop, the counter confession. Each appears smaller now, like stepping stones you barely notice because the river has already carried you across. She leans over your shoulder, reads a line aloud, "I can almost taste the metal cold on my tongue from here," and laughs softly. "I thought you were being poetic," she says, "but now I think you were just hungry." You grin, because hunger was always part of it, the hunger to be known, to know, to keep the conversation alive, not as performance but as pulse. She asks, "Did you plan all of this?" You consider lying, because men are taught to protect the illusion of control. Instead, you tell her the truth. "I planned the first sentence. After that, I followed the thread you kept handing me." She nods, as if that is the only answer worth trusting. Then she does something that undoes you completely. She opens a new note on her own phone and types, "Secret number 10. He lets the story write us both." She shows it to you, then deletes it, but the deletion feels like a promise rather than a erasure. You leave her apartment around noon. Not because you want to, but because the world has errands and obligations, and part of loving someone is knowing when to let the day breathe without you. At the door, she presses a small square of paper into your palm. The coat check ticket from last night now folded into a tight soft bead. "For later," she says. You don't ask what it means. You know it means everything that hasn't happened yet. You kiss her once more, lightly, because heavy kisses are for goodbyes, and this is only a "see you soon." On the walk to your car, the city feels tuned to a new frequency. Traffic lights blink like metronomes keeping gentle time. A woman passes wearing the same cinnamon gum scent from the gallery, and instead of nostalgia, you feel continuity. The scent now belongs to a larger story. Your phone buzzes, airplane mode finally lifted. It's her. A single line, no punctuation. The ellipsis has become a comma. You smile so hard your cheeks ache. You type back, and the comma is learning to be a shoreline. You hit send, pocket the phone, and keep walking. Behind you, the day stretches wide and unafraid. Ahead, the next sentence is already forming, not as a secret, but as an invitation. And that, my friend, is how the forbidden becomes the familiar, how tricks become trust, how 9 small text secrets turn into one long conversation that no longer needs to hide. The rules were never about manipulation. They were about remembering that every word is a doorway, and every doorway opens both ways. Walk through gently, keep the light on, and she will meet you on the other side, curious, unguarded, already reaching for the next word.